Welcome to 15-Minute Discourse, and today we're diving into the world of autonomous weaponry and the AI arms race. And wow, you've given us quite the reading list.
Yeah.
We have academic papers and defense policies, news articles, and even some sci-fi references in here, so this should be a fun one.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. Just even starting with how do we define autonomous weapons? I mean, the Department of Defense, they have a pretty narrow definition focusing on weapon systems that can select and engage targets without human input.
So like not a Terminator with a gun then?
Well, not exactly right. That's the narrow DoD definition, but, a
Yeah.
lot of experts, they use a much broader definition, right? They include systems that can learn and adapt. It's not just about being programmed to do something. It's about being able to think on the fly. That raises even more ethical questions.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
I mean, where do we even draw the line, right? Is it about the initial programming, or is it about the AI's ability to, like I said, think on its own?
Make its own decisions.
Exactly. And this leads to different levels of human control, which complicates things even further. We've got, human-in-the-loop systems where a person has to approve any action.
Right.
Then there's human-on-the-loop, where a person can override the system, but they're not always, directly involved.
Right.
And then the one that, kind of keeps people up at night is the human-out-of-the-loop systems, where the AI is making all the calls.
Definitely getting into some Black Mirror territory there.
It is, right? And it really begs the question, has this line already been crossed? There are some reports out there that suggest that autonomous weapons may have already been used
Wow.
in certain conflict zones.
That's a little unsettling.
It is, and it makes this whole idea of an AI arms race a lot less like science fiction and a lot more like a very real possibility.
Yeah, a real possibility.
And a dangerous one. Because right now, nations are competing to develop the most sophisticated military AI out there. They all want to get an edge. And it's really similar to, historical arms races, like the nuclear arms race we saw in the 20th century.
Right. And we all know how that turned out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can imagine how high the stakes are with AI, right? We're talking about systems that can learn to adapt and potentially make decisions that humans wouldn't.
That's right. Yeah, it seems like the potential for things to really spiral out of control is huge.
It is immense. Imagine two AI systems pitted against each other, constantly trying to outmaneuver each other.
Yeah, outsmart the other one. Yeah.
Exactly. And, these systems, they're not perfect. I was reading this report about a self-driving car that, tragically hit and killed a pedestrian.
Oh, God.
Because the AI, it couldn't anticipate, a person walking into the road.
Wow. Yeah, so it makes a mistake.
It made a mistake. And now imagine that kind of error, happening on a battlefield with autonomous weapons.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
The consequences would be devastating. And that really highlights the need for what experts call adversarial robustness.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially designing these AI systems in a way so that they can't be easily fooled or manipulated.
Right, so they can't be hacked.
Exactly, or tricked by unexpected situations.
Right, so it's not just about programming them to follow orders. We need to make sure that they can think critically about the information they're getting.
Absolutely. And we also need to ensure that these systems are transparent, in their decision-making process, so that if an AI makes a critical decision, especially one that involves, the use of force, we can understand why it made that decision.
You don't want just like a black box making these decisions about life or death.
Exactly. We need accountability.
Right.
And that's where the idea of AI guardrails comes in.
Yeah.
These mechanisms built into the system to, control our behavior and to prevent misuse.
Right.
And there's some really interesting things happening in this area. Companies like NVIDIA, they're working on guardrails for their AI models to make sure that, the AI stays within predefined boundaries.
It's almost like an emergency brake.
Exactly. And, even with all these safeguards, I think it's safe to say that the ethical concerns surrounding autonomous weapons are still huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, even just starting out with that makes it seem like there's a lot more to think about here.
There is, and one of the biggest concerns is the potential for these systems to violate international law, particularly the principles of distinction and proportionality in warfare.
Can you break those down for us a little bit?
Sure. Distinction basically means being able to tell the difference between combatants and non-combatants.
Oh, okay.
And proportionality refers to the use of force that's appropriate to the military objective.
Gotcha.
And with autonomous weapons, there's this real worry that these principles could be blurred,
Right.
potentially leading to unintended casualties and even war crimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine an AI in the heat of battle, always having the same judgment.
Exactly the same restraint as a human soldier. And even if we program the AI with, the best of intentions, there's always a chance of something unexpected happening.
Right. A variable that we didn't think of.
Exactly. And that's why a lot of experts are calling for a ban, on fully autonomous weapons,
Yeah.
saying the risks are just too high.
Makes sense. And, it's not just those experts either, right? I mean, we've even seen people like Elon Musk and Stuart Russell who are, really big in the AI world, voicing their concerns about this.
Exactly. And it's not about, robots turning on us like in the movies.
Yeah.
But it's about making sure that we develop AI responsibly and that, human life is protected.
Right. It's about keeping those values at the forefront as we develop this technology.
Absolutely.
So this brings us to this bigger question of, AI safety and regulation.
Exactly.
It's not just about autonomous weapons. It's about making sure that all these AI systems are developed and used ethically.
Exactly. And this is where the global community really needs to step up. We need to work together to establish ethical guidelines and regulations to prevent the creation of, these potentially dangerous AI systems.
That's a big challenge.
It is, but it's one that we can't ignore. The future of AI is being shaped right now.
That's right.
And it's critical that we have a say in how that future unfolds.
I completely agree.
It's not just about governments and policymakers.
Yeah.
We all have a stake in this.
So what can, the average person do to make their voice heard?
There are a couple things. First, educate yourself, The more you know about AI,
Right.
the more you can, advocate for responsible development.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. And, support organizations that are, working to promote AI safety, ethical AI development. There are a lot of groups out there doing great work.
Yeah.
Have conversations with, your family, your friends, your colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah.
The more people who are aware of these issues, the better.
The more likely we are to make good decisions.
Exactly. And hold your elected officials accountable.
Oh, yeah.
Let them know that you care about this and that you expect them to make it a priority.
Right. Right. Letters make calls.
Exactly. Because the future of AI, it's not going to be decided by, a few tech giants or, government agencies. It's something that we all need to be involved in shaping.
I love that sentiment. I think this has been a really eye-opening discussion so far.
Yeah, me too.
And we've covered a lot of ground, but I feel like there's still so much more to explore.
I agree. We've just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, we have.
But I hope that this deep dive, has given you a better understanding of the issues and why this is so important.
So we've been talking about all the ethical dilemmas,
Great.
the potential risks, and the global efforts to regulate this powerful technology.
It's a topic that I think gets lost sometimes,
Yeah.
in all the hype and the fear surrounding AI.
Right.
And we really want to bring some clarity to the conversation.
Yeah, nuance. And these aren't just, hypothetical scenarios from sci-fi movies.
Huh.
We're talking about real-world technologies that are being developed and deployed right now.
Exactly. And this has huge implications for the future of warfare and for humanity.
Yeah, and it's a conversation that's just beginning.
It is. We need everyone to join in.
Absolutely. So let's dive in a little deeper.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that there are different levels of human control over these systems.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little more?
Sure. Those three classifications, the human in the loop, human on the loop, and human out of the loop,
Right.
they really illustrate the spectrum of autonomy that's possible with these weapons.
Okay.
So let's start with the human in the loop systems. This is where a human operator is directly involved in every decision to use lethal force.
So essentially, it's a remote-controlled weapon like a drone.
Exactly. The AI might help with targeting or navigation, but the human always makes that final decision to fire.
Right.
Then you've got human on the loop systems.
Okay.
These are a little more autonomous.
Okay.
So in these cases, the AI, it can select and engage targets on its own, but there's always a human operator there monitoring the situation and able to override the AI if necessary.
So kind of like having a co-pilot who can take over if things get a little crazy.
That's a great way to put it. The idea is to have faster reaction times greater efficiency,
Yeah.
but still maintain human oversight.
Okay.
But then you get to that most controversial category, the human out of the loop systems.
The ones that give everyone the creeps.
Exactly. These are weapons that are completely autonomous. They can select and engage targets without any human involvement at all.
So we're talking about a machine deciding who lives and who dies.
Exactly. And that's why so many people are so concerned about this technology.
Yeah.
It raises some really fundamental questions about accountability ethics, the very nature of warfare.
Right. I mean, when you put it that way, it seems like those concerns are completely valid.
They are. And, so what are the main arguments for and against, developing these fully autonomous weapons?
Right. Let's start with the arguments in favor.
Okay, so those who support, autonomous weapons,
Right.
they often say that this could make warfare more humane by reducing civilian casualties.
Okay.
And the logic there is that machines, unlike humans, they're not susceptible to emotions like fear, anger, revenge, which can lead to those rash decisions and unnecessary violence.
So they're saying that robots would basically be more rational
Yeah.
and less likely to make mistakes that result in, harming
Yeah.
civilians.
Exactly. They also argue that autonomous weapons, they could be used in situations that are just too dangerous for human soldiers, like clearing minefields or conducting reconnaissance in really dangerous areas, and that this would minimize the risk to human life, while still achieving the military objective.
Right. So it's about protecting soldiers.
Exactly.
And I could see how those arguments would be appealing, especially to, military leaders who are always trying to find ways to reduce casualties.
Clear.
But what about the arguments against these weapons?
Well, there are many, and they're very serious.
Okay.
First and foremost is this ethical question
Right.
of whether it's morally acceptable to delegate the decision to kill to a machine.
Right. Can a machine even understand the value of human life?
Exactly. Can it make these, life or death decisions
Yeah.
with the same judgment and compassion as a human being?
I think most people would say no to that.
I think so too. And, even if it could,
Right.
there's still the question of accountability.
Oh, yeah.
If an autonomous weapon commits a war crime, who is responsible?
Yeah.
The programmer, the commander who deployed it, the machine itself.
It's a tough question.
It's a legal and moral minefield.
For sure. And we're used to holding individuals accountable
Right.
for their actions in war.
Exactly.
But with autonomous weapons, those lines get blurred.
Exactly. And there's always a chance of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
No matter how advanced the AI is, there's always the chance of, an error, a malfunction.
Genes break down.
Code can have bugs,
That's right.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine entrusting a machine with that power to kill without some level of risk.
Exactly. And then there's the potential for these weapons to fall into the wrong hands.
Oh, yeah.
Terrorist groups, rogue states.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
It is. And there's also the worry that this could lead to a new arms race.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Where countries are trying to build the most sophisticated and deadly systems.
Which ultimately could make the world less safe.
Exactly. So as you can see, there are some very serious ethical and practical concerns surrounding autonomous weapons, and these concerns are being raised by people from all walks of life.
Right.
Scientists, engineers, philosophers, human rights activists.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's weighing in on this.
They are.
And it makes sense because it really does seem like this is a technology that has the power to change the nature of warfare and maybe even the course of human history.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important that we're having these conversations now before it's too late. We have to think carefully about the implications of this technology.
For sure.
And make sure that its development and deployment are guided by ethical principles and, a real commitment to human well-being.
I couldn't agree more. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Yeah, we have. In this first segment, we've defined autonomous weapons.
Right.
We've explored the different levels of human control.
Exactly.
We've looked at the arguments for and against their development.
Yes.
And we've even touched on some of the ethical and legal challenges posed by this technology.
We have.
So in the next segment, we're going to explore those challenges in a little more depth.
Okay.
And we'll discuss the global efforts to regulate autonomous weapons.
Well, that's good.
I think it's pretty clear that the risks are pretty substantial.
They are. And it's not just hypothetical stuff either, right? These are real concerns that are being raised by, experts in the field. Like, one of the big ones is the potential for these weapons to, malfunction or to be hacked.
Right. I mean, any complex system can have glitches.
Right.
Vulnerabilities.
Of course, yeah.
And with autonomous weapons, those glitches could be catastrophic.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, imagine, an autonomous drone misidentifies a target.
Oh, wow.
And attacks, a civilian building.
Gosh.
Or a swarm of robots, goes haywire and just starts attacking indiscriminately. But it's a real possibility.
Yeah, it is.
And it's not just about technical malfunctions either, right?
Right.
There's also the risk that these weapons could be hacked.
Yeah.
Deliberately reprogrammed by bad actors.
Right. So terrorists could get their hands on these weapons.
Potentially, yes.
And turn them against us.
It's a real concern. And it's not just terrorists, right? We also have to think about, rogue states, even criminal organizations getting access to this technology.
It's a scary thought, and even if we could somehow guarantee that these weapons would never malfunction or be hacked,
Yeah.
there are still some really big ethical questions.
Absolutely. One of the biggest is this lack of, human judgment and compassion
Yeah.
in these systems. Machines, even the really sophisticated ones, they just don't have the same capacity for moral reasoning that humans do.
Right. I mean, we keep talking about, these machines making rational decisions,
Right.
but at the end of the day, they're just following their programming.
Exactly. And that programming, no matter how complex it is,
Yeah.
it's always going to be limited by the biases and assumptions of the people who created it.
Right. So even if we could program an autonomous weapon to follow the rules of war perfectly, there's still the possibility that, those rules themselves are flawed.
Yeah.
Or that the machine might apply them in a way that we didn't anticipate.
Precisely. And that's why a lot of people are saying that we need to draw a really clear ethical line when it comes to autonomous weapons, and that we need to make sure that there's always a human in the loop making those final decisions about, when and where to use lethal force.
So no killer robots running around making their own decisions.
Exactly. Human judgment and compassion.
Yeah.
They're essential for any ethical use of force.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of work to do
There is.
to make sure that these weapons are developed and used responsibly.
Right.
So what's being done on a global level to address these concerns?
Well, there's a growing movement to regulate autonomous weapons, internationally. The UN has been having discussions about this for several years now.
Okay.
And there are a lot of NGOs and advocacy groups that are pushing for a ban on fully autonomous weapons.
So there's a real push to get these weapons under control before they become too widespread.
Exactly. The concern is that if we wait too long, it'll be too late. Once these weapons are out there, it's going to be really hard to put the genie back in the bottle.
Right. It's like with nuclear weapons. Once they were developed, it was impossible to completely get rid of them.
Exactly. And with autonomous weapons, the stakes are even higher.
Yeah.
Because they're potentially much easier to spread.
Right.
Nuclear weapons need, special materials, expertise. But autonomous weapons could be built with, relatively off-the-shelf technology.
So it's not just about, a few powerful countries controlling these things.
Right.
We can see them spreading to all sorts of actors.
Exactly. From small states to terrorist groups.
Right. And that's, I guess, why so many people are calling for a ban on these weapons before they even really get started.
A preemptive ban. Exactly. They argue it's the only way to prevent a future where these weapons are everywhere.
Right.
And they destabilize, the whole international system.
It's a scary thought. And it really highlights how important it is that we have these conversations
Right.
now before it's too late.
I agree. The future of warfare, maybe even the future of humanity is at stake here.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that we're making informed, ethical decisions
Right.
about, how we develop and use these powerful technologies.
You've given us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear that autonomous weapons are a complex issue.
They are.
And there's no easy answers.
Right.
But one thing's for sure, we need to have these conversations.
We do.
We need to have them now.
Absolutely. We can't just, ignore this and pretend it's not happening. We need to be proactive. We need to be engaged.
Let's shift gears a little bit. We've been talking a lot about the global efforts to regulate autonomous weapons.
Right.
But what about AI safety in general? What are some of the key challenges and approaches to making sure that AI is developed and used responsibly, not just in the military, but like across the board?
That's a great question. And AI safety is a really complex challenge, right?
Oh, for sure.
It involves so many different issues, from making sure that these systems are reliable to preventing them from being used for, harmful purposes.
Yeah.
And it really requires a multidisciplinary approach.
Right. So it's not just computer scientists.
Exactly. It's not just about writing better code.
Right.
It's about, addressing the ethical, social, political implications of AI.
Right. It's about the big picture.
Exactly. And one of the big challenges is that these AI systems are often opaque.
Okay. What does that mean?
So it means it can be hard to understand, how they work.
Right.
And why they make the decisions they do. And this lack of transparency,
Right.
it makes it hard to identify and correct, biases or errors.
Gotcha.
And it can also make it difficult to hold people accountable for the actions of these systems.
So even if we could program an AI to follow the rules perfectly, we might not understand why it made a particular decision or who to blame if something goes wrong.
Right, and that's why there's this push for explainable AI, which is all about developing systems that can explain their decisions.
So they can tell us why they did what they did.
Exactly, in a way that we can understand. And that helps build trust in these systems.
Makes sense.
Right, and it makes it easier to, spot and fix any problems.
Right. I mean, if we're going to be relying on AI to make important decisions, we need to be able to understand how it's making those decisions.
Exactly, and explainability is just one piece of the puzzle. We also have to think about robustness.
Okay.
Making sure these systems are resistant to errors, malfunctions, attacks.
Right, so they're strong.
Exactly. We also need to think about fairness. Making sure they're not discriminating against certain groups of people. And we need to think about control, making sure we can always, override or shut down a system if it starts to behave in a way that we don't want.
It sounds like there's a lot to consider.
There is.
But it seems like we're at this really important point in the development of AI.
I think we are. Yeah.
We have this opportunity to shape this technology in a way that benefits humanity.
Right.
But we also have a responsibility to make sure that we're not creating something that could hurt us.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most important things we can do is to just talk about it.
Right.
Have these open and honest conversations about the issues.
Bring everyone to the table.
Exactly. We need to bring together experts from all different fields, policymakers, industry leaders, the public, to talk about the potential risks and benefits of AI.
Yeah.
And to develop, ethical guidelines and regulations.
Yeah, to make sure that it's used for good.
Exactly. It's about having this shared vision for the future of AI.
Yeah.
A vision that prioritizes human well-being and makes sure that, this powerful technology is used to create a more just and equitable world for everyone.
I love that it's a vision that we need to start building now.
We do.
There's this one last piece of the puzzle I'm really curious about.
Yeah, I think I know where we're going with this. It's the question that keeps a lot of experts up at night.
Exactly. If an autonomous weapons system actually commits a war crime, who do we hold accountable?
Right. It really exposes this gap in our legal and ethical thinking, right?
Yeah.
Our current systems of accountability, they're built around, human actors.
Yeah, human action.
So can we really hold, a programmer responsible for code that's evolved way beyond their initial design?
That doesn't seem fair, does it?
It doesn't, especially, if the AI has learned and adapted in ways that the programmer could never have imagined.
Right.
And what about the commanding officer, who deployed the system? They may not even fully understand how the AI is making decisions.
Right. So where does that leave us? I mean, are we going to start talking about robot rights, AI on trial?
It's not as far-fetched as you might think.
Really?
Yeah. Some legal scholars are already exploring this concept of, electronic personhood for AI, especially in cases where, they're making complex autonomous decisions.
It's mind-blowing. It makes you really rethink the whole idea of responsibility in this age of AI.
It does. And it's not just warfare. Think about self-driving cars, medical AI algorithms that control, financial markets. As these systems get more and more autonomous, we need new ways of thinking about accountability.
Right. It's like we're building this whole new legal and ethical system.
Yeah.
For a world where machines are making more and more of the decisions.
Exactly, and it's uncharted territory. There are no easy answers, but we have to have these conversations. The stakes are just too high.
Well, this whole deep dive has really underscored that point.
Yeah.
So what are some potential paths forward?
Yeah.
Where do we even begin to address this accountability gap?
Well, first of all, I think we need more collaboration. Between different fields, lawyers, ethicists, philosophers, AI researchers, everyone needs to be involved.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the societal impact, the moral implication.
Again, we need to really prioritize transparency in AI development.
Mm-hmm.
These black box systems where even the creators don't know how the AI is reasoning, that's just not going to work.
Right. It's like trying to hold someone accountable for a crime when you don't even know how they did it.
That's a great analogy. And finally, we have to be proactive, not reactive, waiting for AI to cause a major catastrophe before we act. That's just a recipe for disaster.
So no waiting for the robot uprising to happen before we set some ground rules.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But seriously, the time to act is now.
Yeah, it seems like it. This has been a really thought-provoking conversation. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this topic.
I agree. It's a complex issue and it's constantly evolving. But hopefully this deep dive has, given you a better understanding of what's at stake.
It has for me, for sure.
And why it's so important to stay engaged.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, if this conversation has sparked your curiosity,
And remember, the future of AI is not set in stone. You know,
Right.
we all have a role to play in shaping it.
I love that. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up another episode of 15-Minute Discourse. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who wants to join this conversation about the future of AI. And until next time, keep those minds curious.